Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on what time you're watching this. My name's Connor from 905 Review. You're tuning into our series Give This a Spin, where I recommend you guys some of my favorite albums. Today we look at the widely heralded classic, The Beatles, aka The White Album. The Beatles were already on top of the music world by this point in 1968. They had gone from a revolutionary pop rock act to one constantly evolving and changing their sound. Having given up on touring by 1966, in large part due to their crowds being so loud and wild the band could barely even hear themselves, they were able to dedicate that much more time to the studio, where they would continue to innovate. This led to such wilder releases as Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and the Magical Mystery Tour, as well as the cartoon film Yellow Submarine. The band then took a meditative retreat to India in 1968, along with fellow artist Donovan, Mike Love of the Beach Boys, actress Mia Farrow, and her sister Prudence, and would be instructed by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the pioneer of transcendental meditation. Many of the songs from this album were inspired by the visit, so why don't we take a listen? Buckle up, because what a journey we're in for here. The album starts off with the band's hit Back in the USSR, noted for its signature use of an airplane landing to start the song. Paul wrote the song as somewhat of a parody of American bands like the Beach Boys, who would write songs about having fun times in the sun, and instead flipped this to be about a Russian lad who's missing the mountains and the Soviet girls back home, the same way an American might miss Californian girls.
Well, the Ukraine girls really knock me out. The West behind, and Moscow girls make me sing and shout.
What was simply a gag didn't win the band many friends in the political sphere, as painting the Soviets as everyday people with their own interests and desires like the rest of us wasn't exactly a popular move in America in the 60s. Furthermore, it didn't help that the song came out shortly after Operation Danube, in which the Soviet Union, along with Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, and East Germany, invaded what was then Czechoslovakia. Moving on, this then fades into Dear Prudence, which actually has a pretty cute backstory to it. During the group's stay in India, Prudence Farrow had become obsessive about her meditation, often staying isolated for days on end. As John and George were apparently the ones she trusted most in the group, they tried to help her socialize and normalize again, leading to Lennon writing this song, and hence the overall soft tone to it. Another thing of note, this song and the previous one were actually recorded in a brief period where Ringo Starr had actually left the Beatles, as he could no longer put up with Paul McCartney's constant roasting of his playing on Back in the USSR. So even though they are straightforward, I do really like the sound of the drums on this, specifically the hi-hat. Maybe the Beatles really were better without Ringo. He would, of course, return soon after to see his drum set decorated with flowers by George. What a nice guy. Following this is Glass Onion. It's another song of lyrical trickery in the same vein as I Am the Walrus, to kind of throw a curveball to everybody who overanalyzes every single Beatles lyric. It then ends with a dreary violin outro. The mood instantly changes as a cheery, upbeat piano kicks off the song Obla Di Obla Da. I never liked the song much when I was a younger, angst-filled teen, mostly due to its overly cheery and happy sound, but now that I'm older, or even maybe just now that I don't listen to the radio anymore and don't have to hear it all the time, I can really appreciate it. I guess I wasn't the only one not to like it, as Lennon apparently called it some granny music shit, in his words. It's very wholesome and cute, just a happy story about nice family life. As for the Obla Di Obla Da part, it was an expression used by Jimmy Scott, a friend of the band's, that Paul liked so much he chose to use it, upsetting Scott that he didn't first ask for permission. This then brings us to Wild Honey Pie. Admittedly, I haven't listened to every single Beatles album, so I can't say for sure. But this is probably the worst song they ever fucking made. It was a solo experimental project by McCartney, while Lennon and Starr were working on another song, and while Harrison was on vacation. In fact, it likely wouldn't have even made the cut for the album, but George Harrison's wife liked the song so much for whatever reason, so she's to blame. After that minute-long fever dream is over, we pick up right where we left off, with another fun and harmonious song in the continuing story of Bungalow Bill.
All the children sing, hey, Bungalow Bill, what did you kill? Bungalow Bill.
This song too was born from the India trip, when an obnoxious American family partook in the Maharishi's meditation group. They went out hunting tigers, then came back afterwards to meditate and try to reach a higher power. Something conflicting that really rubbed Lennon the wrong way. Next is an all-time classic Beatles tune, rather an all-time classic tune, period, While My Guitar Gently Weeps.
Gently weeps. I don't know why.
While John Lennon and Paul McCartney were constantly fighting, Ringo Starr had already left the band and soon rejoined. It left poor George Harrison in the middle of it all. This would be reflected in his lyrics, as he was trying to show development as a songwriter, as Lennon and McCartney had been the primary two throughout the Beatles' history, and they initially shut George down when he brought this to them. It took bringing in Eric Clapton to play guitar on this for the rest of the band to see how good it really was. Truly a soulful masterpiece. Good on you, George. Ending the first side of the first record, we reach Happiness is a Warm Gun. It still employs the psychedelic feel that was present on the band's previous couple albums.
I need a fix 'cause I'm going down.
The joint penned effort by Lennon and McCartney has a different idea from each intertwined within. McCartney writing influenced by an NRA magazine he had seen, and Lennon simply writing about his love for his girlfriend Yoko Ono. With multiple changes throughout the song, it took the band over 70 takes to get accurately. But it paid off. Both Lennon and McCartney consider this one of their favorite tunes. Opening the second side of the first record is Martha My Dear. With how cute this McCartney song is, you'd think Lennon would have written it off as being some granny music or whatever. But he made an exception, since Paul was writing it about his dog.
Each other, silly girl.
The support the strings and horns bring this make it a complete and beautiful song. At the 10th track now, we reach I'm So Tired. It serves as a love letter from John to Yoko in how much he was missing her while he was in India and how he couldn't sleep over it. I love the way the song picks up and progresses at the chorus. Can't help but sing to it.
Oh, I can't sleep. I can't stop the brain. You know it's 3 weeks. I'm going insane. You know I give you everything I've got for a little peace of mind.
After this is another popular Beatles song in Blackbird. It's a very soft McCartney ballad, and with the openness to its lyrics, can be interpreted as a variety of things. Most commonly accepted is that it's supporting the civil rights movement. However, Paul McCartney's stepmother believed it was written about her mother, who while she was very sick, would be visited by a blackbird every night.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly.
Regardless, I've honestly never been too crazy about the song. This is then followed by Piggies, an Animal Farm inspired take on the greed and consumerism in the world. It's a good idea in theory, but I definitely think I'd like it more if it came across as less goofy.
His life is getting worse. Always having dirt to play around. surrounded.
I mean, it's a semi-serious political stance, right? Not that that can't be done through a gag. I'm just not crazy about the cheery sound and the harpsichord use in it. We then get to a nice campfire tale in Rocky Raccoon. Rocky is a Midwest cowboy sworn to get his revenge on a man named Dan who stole his girl McGill from him.
And one day his woman ran off with another guy, hit young Rocky in the eye. Rocky didn't like that. He said, I'm gonna get that boy.
This then leads to a duel which Rocky would lose, and he looks to his Bible for hope after the drunken doctor was of no help at all. Incredible tale, incredible tune. This then brings us to Don't Pass Me By. It is the first Beatles song written completely by Ringo and dates as far back as 1964. It's a real fun and swinging song, but the drums on it sound so big and raw, which actually works surprisingly well for it.
I listen for your footsteps.
At the 15th track now, we have Why Don't We Do It in the Road. It's a very bluesy and straightforward piece by McCartney, inspired by an event in the group's India trip in which he saw two monkeys procreating in the street. This then led him to think, why do human relations have to be so complex and it take us so long to get to that intimate point with another person when two monkeys, or any animal in the animal kingdom, can meet for the first time and do it on the spot.
Why don't we do it in the road? Why don't we do it in the road?
Lennon was real upset that McCartney didn't ask him for help on this song, but that just shows the state the band was in at this time. Members were constantly going off into different rooms working on material, and it led to a lot of songs on the album where there's certain members left off. This is followed by another McCartney track in I Will. It's a short, simple, sweet love song.
Will I wait a lonely lifetime? If you want me to, I will.
And ending the first record, we get to the Lennon piece Julia. It was written partly for Yoko, but more so for his mother, who he missed out on a lot of time with. John's parents split up when he was young, leading to his aunt taking him in. He would later reconnect with his mother, however she would pass when he was only 17.
Calls me, so I sing the song of love, Julia.
Starting off the second disc is the track Birthday. Even though I've known this song for a long time, it's honestly only been in the past couple years I found out it was by the Beatles. Because I can't speak for other regions, as I don't know how they would operate, but as a southern or eastern Ontario kid, if you went to a minor hockey league game, you were pretty much bound to hear this whenever they would announce birthdays of attendees in the crowd. So now this song is pretty much synonymous with that for me. Realistically, it's a pretty swinging tune. The added piano is a nice touch, but the lyrics are weak, and I hate the bridge. I feel like the song had potential, if only they would have dedicated more time to it. I guess I'm not the only one, because Lennon would later go on to call the song garbage, so... This then brings us to the raunchy Your Blues. It's very dark in nature for a Beatles song, and is based around Lennon's feelings towards the end of the group's stay in India. He was tired of being there and missing his Yoko so much he wanted to die.
In the evening, wanna die.
Even if the song was written as a parody of blues, it has got so much grit to it. Easily one of my favorites on the album. Next we have Mother Nature's Son. A nice acoustic piece about simply enjoying nature.
At a mountain stream, see her
And then we arrive at everybody's got something to hide except for me and my monkey. It's another rocking number, and nobody can really pinpoint what it's about. Paul assumed it was about John's drug use. George pointed out that a lot of the lyrics were things said by the Maharishi, except for the part about there being a monkey. John said it was about him and Yoko just trying to do their thing, and everybody always being so upset around them, throwing a fuss about them, which I mean, kind of rude if that means she's the monkey. The Beatles were also always a no girls allowed club, so it did rub the other members the wrong way when suddenly John was bringing Yoko to all the sessions. This then brings us to the 22nd track, Sexy Sadie. First of all, big fan of the sound of the piano on this.
You broke the rules. You laid it down for all to see. You laid it down.
Additionally, this song is not about a sexy lady, rather about the Maharishi. Allegedly, he made an advance on one of the camp attendees, which none of the Beatles appreciated. The song was originally supposed to be called Maharishi, however, Harrison convinced Lennon to change it, and they came up with Sexy Sadie, as it has the same number of syllables to it, and they still rhyme with each other. In fact, the original was a lot more aggressive. John certainly wasn't holding back. And after this, the absolute classic, Helter Skelter. After Pete Townsend of The Who described the band's new song, I Can See for Miles, as the heaviest thing they had ever done, McCartney listened to it and pretty much thought, psh, that's amateur hour. Check this out. And he came up with Helter Skelter, the hardest song the Beatles ever made, and arguably even a precursor to heavy metal. Even though Ringo briefly left the band, upon returning his dedication could not be questioned, as while recording this song, one of the sessions had him play it in full 18 times in a row, in which he famously ended the last one by throwing his drumsticks away and yelling, "I got blisters on my fingers!" Being significantly more focused on the musical aspect of the song, the lyrics really aren't much. They do just describe going down a slide. I absolutely love this song. Top 3 Beatles tune all time, I would say. It still rocks just as hard today. I cannot even imagine hearing it 50 years ago, before metal was a thing, before punk was a thing, before hard rock bands like Led Zeppelin had even released an album. And ending the first side of the second album, we have the George Harrison track, Long, Long, Long. Written during the group's stay in India, it has Harrison reconnecting with his faith. I am indeed a fan of the organ, as well as the drums on here. Nice relaxing break to recover from Helter Skelter. And starting the final side of the final record is Revolution 1. Perhaps the most known version of the song is the single version, known simply as Revolution, being much faster and distorted, while Revolution 1 has a slower, bluesier feel to it.
You say you want a revolution. You say you want a revolution.
Lyrically, it has Lennon addressing the social and political state of the world, something the Beatles often tended to avoid. He tells us that the world is in need of change, but done without violence. He also reassures us throughout the chorus and the outro of the song that everything is gonna be alright. This then brings us to Honey Pie, a McCartney song inspired by the older type of music his father listened to. It tells the story of an English woman who went to America to become a famous actress and a man missing her back home.
Honey pie, you are making me crazy. I'm in love, but I'm lazy.
After this, we have Savoy Truffle. It's a George Harrison track written about his good friend Eric Clapton and how he liked to eat chocolate.
Cool cherry cream, nice apple tart.
It just has George listing flavors of sweets and warning you to take care of your teeth. I mean, if I were John or Paul, I'd probably have shut him down for his songwriting too, if these were the songs he was bringing. Next we have Cry Baby Cry, a nice, easygoing song, loosely based on a nursery rhyme.
The queen was in the parlor, playing piano for the children of the king. Cry, baby, cry.
And now we have the notorious Revolution 9. The Beatles were experimenting plenty at this time, and this was unquestionably the peak of that. It had John Lennon with the assistance of Yoko Ono and George Harrison, messing around with all sorts of different technical effects, overlaid on top of a extended cut of the track Revolution, with the most notable addition being the recording of a man repeatedly saying number 9. Paul McCartney had apparently been out of the country while they were working on this, so I can only imagine his shock when he came back to the studio and was like, "Alright gang, what you guys been working on?" And they show him this. It is certainly a divisive song among critics, if you can even consider it a song. It's certainly art though, and so I'm interested in it. Keep in mind, the Beatles were the biggest band in the world at this time. I try to liken it to if an artist like Drake were to just toss something like this on an album today, what would the public reaction to it be? So once again, not a great song, but a great piece of art. Not by no means something I can listen to often. And we finally reached the end of this groundbreaking album with Good Night.
Now it's time to say good night, good night.
It's a very sweet and tender piece to close the album with, and a sensible choice to do so. However, I feel like Revolution 9 also would have been a great ending song, especially because to get to this, you have to sit through that. Well, unless you skip over it, I guess. But I feel like a lot of people would probably miss out on this because they'd probably just take the record off if they're not willing to sit through Revolution 9, you know? The Beatles would be the first album released on the band's new independent label, Apple Records. Many prints from 1968 through 1973 featured a serial number printed on the record so you could tell exactly the order yours was made in, with the very first 4 going to each of the band members. Another neat touch, once the album was first produced on CD in 1987, they did the same numbering with it. For the album's 10th anniversary in 1978, it was reissued on a limited edition white vinyl. Other limited editions include a 1978 clear one, a 1978 splatter one, and a 1982 red one released in Japan. In celebration of the album's 50th anniversary in 2018, there was a super deluxe box set released, which included a new mix of the album, 1 disc of demos, and 3 discs of alternate takes of tracks on the album. You could also purchase this set digitally, and they also sold the album plus demos individually, as well as the outtakes individually. Upon its release, the album was an instant hit. At the time, it was the most successful double album ever, in terms of chart position anyway, spending 8 weeks atop the British charts and 9 atop the American. While it only spent 22 total weeks on the British charts at any position, it spent 186 on the American. This overseas success was reflected by Capitol Records, handling the American release of the album, who in the first 4 days of it being out managed to sell 3 million copies. The album has since been certified 24 times platinum, the most of any Beatles record. It was the start of the end of the biggest band in the world. The tension was so intense, members were often going off in different groups working on songs. Ringo briefly left. Hell, even producer George Martin briefly left. Even engineer Jeff Emmerich straight up quit. The decision for this to be a self-titled album really was an adequate one, as it showed everything the Beatles were and everything they could be. All the different directions they could possibly go were all encaptured on this release. It has rock, it has pop, it has easy listening, it has ska, it has country, it has blues, it has psychedelic, it has arguably metal, it has sound collage, it has it all. The biggest of fans would argue that they hit the mark every time. Now, admittedly, I'm not crazy about the Beatles, but I do appreciate everything this album is. If a band I were more invested in, say like a Pink Floyd or a Radiohead, did something like this at the end of their tenure, showing all the different directions they were going in, I'm sure I would be all about it. Nonetheless, this was a seminal piece in the band's history and a largely respected one, leading me to stamp this with an A- grading. There's many big hits of the band's on here, plenty of my own personal favorites, but at 30 tracks long, you're bound to have some tracks that you're better without. Matter of fact, the biggest bone I have to pick is that they kept so many of these songs I can do without. Meanwhile, their single Hey Jude, which was recorded during these sessions, was left off the album, which to me is an absolute travesty. With that being said, that ends my rant on the White Album. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time. But before we take off, what were your thoughts on this ridiculous, ambitious album? Do you like hearing all the group's diversity, or is it too wild and too out there for you? Did I rate the album too high, or did I rate the album too low? You let me know down below, as well as any other thoughts you might have, albums you might want to hear my thoughts on, and we'll see you next time.